Hi, and welcome to the Vino Karma Show. My name is Amanda Layden, and I am here today with the amazing Ashley Trout, the founder and winemaker for Vital Wines. Vital Wines is a non-profit winery for better healthcare for vineyard and cellar workers. So before we jump into our conversation, please remember to like and subscribe below, and go ahead and follow Ashley on Instagram at Vital Wines. Ashley, it's really great to see you. Welcome to Vino Karma.
Amanda, thanks for having me. It's really great to be here.
I'm so excited you're here because I think the work you're doing is incredibly important. And, I just hope you can share with people who don't know who you are a little bit about who you are and how you got into the wine industry.
Okay, yeah. So my name's Ashley Trout, and I got into the wine industry when I was 18. It was just sort of right place, right time. I started doing the nighttime punch downs late at night, which is what 18-year-olds are good for. And then the rest is history. I've been in the industry all my adult life and love it. And grew up in a bicultural, bilingual household, and it was really clear to me early on that there were some things that needed to be resolved on that front here, not just here, but really any wine growing region. But what was specific to here was that I was here and I could do something about it, and also it was a newer wine industry. And I think one thing that happens in older wine industries is you get that bridge generation that grows up old enough that they start tackling those issues on an organic front, right? An organic growth front. And we hadn't had that time yet. And I didn't want to wait any longer. So I started Vital Wines.
That's so great. So you've had Vital Wines since 2016, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you strive to make the community a better place and to create one community where there's been many. How do you go about doing this? Bridging the gap with the communities and in the greater wine industry as a whole.
Yeah, great question. So I think perfection is the enemy of progress on something like this. Day one, you're not going to nail it. Nobody's going to nail it. You're not going to win all the wins. And so that's huge. And then I think meeting people where they are. So we do this really cool dinner where once a year where for every dinner ticket sold, that's also a donated seat for a harvest worker who harvested for Vital that year. And I realized immediately early on that two things. One, I needed to go tell the Latino population that was coming that night, like, we don't need you to speak English. We don't need you to dress a certain way. We don't need you to sit next to a bunch of gringos and have it be incredibly awkward all night long, right? We just need you to show up in any capacity that you're willing to show up, right? Everybody just for one night a year needs to show up, and we're baby stepping. And so I think meeting people where they are, and that happened, and that was, sort of slightly awkward for everybody, but everybody understood it was important. And then by the third year, we had these situations where like the crews were showing up and the women were kicking their husbands out, and we're like, we're going to have a ladies table, and they drank all the muscat and they hooted and hollered. And then it was great. But like, I think it just takes a hot second.
That's great. I think there's so many kind of underserved populations, particularly in the wine industry. And one of them, which I think people don't understand, are really truly the backbone of this industry is sometimes the immigrant population here in America. Can you share a little bit more about how we can support specifically that population or the population that works in the vineyards?
That's really hard to do. I mean, in the sense that it's a great question. And I think it really goes back to baby steps. I think just the fact that you even asked that question somewhere in the interweb somehow is like step one, right? And then step two is you get 60,000 more people to ask that same question until finally wineries as a whole are sort of market pressured into dotting their T's and crossing their I's, not just in an organic or a biodynamic front, but in a social, what's the word I'm looking for? basic human rights front, right? And then you get that certification, or you at least answer for it on your website if that certification isn't robust or reliable. And so I think those are kind of the next steps, and you're seeing some of that happen, but we can have more.
Definitely. I'm seeing now, people are being like, organizations and wineries sometimes are almost, their feet are being put to the fire because certain things have gone on in the industry, especially in the past year. And there's some things that happened overnight. I don't know if you've been watching what's been going on just around, basic human rights and how we show up and how we treat others. And in this day and age, like, consumers are watching, if they want to know, are people being treated humanely? Are people being paid a fair wage? Is there sexual harassment in your organization? They want to know all of these things. And it's really important, I think, whatever side of the industry we're on, that we start thinking seriously and thoughtfully and intentionally about how we set our organizations up. So I appreciate you bringing that up. You at Vital Wines have given back so much to the community. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've achieved by making this wine and some of the ways you've given back?
Yeah, it's been a really wild ride. It's been really, really exciting and fulfilling. And I think one of the things that we noticed with Vital, when you talk about meeting people where they are, is Vital's been sort of this carrot dangling between these two communities. And so it's very easy for us to move to the left or move to the right and sort of be there for all entities in whatever way they want to help. And what I noticed very early on, and it was a shock to me, is that many of the problems we face as an industry go back to the fact that I think deep down inside, we're all still in 7th grade. We're all still worried about looking stupid, right? So like as a crew boss who's really concerned about his crew, like truly the expiration date or the physical blockage to that going 2 or 3 or 5 steps further is just, am I going to look stupid? Right? Mm-hmm. Am I going to look stupid speaking Spanish? Am I going to look stupid wearing the wrong thing? Am I going to look stupid when I eat the thing the wrong way? Right? Whatever it is. And the same is true for the Latino community going the other direction. So when you have this carrot sort of dangling in the middle, the world just unleashes. And we have had this downpouring of volunteers and donations. And I usually have to turn down between 30 and 100 tons of donated fruit every year. So wow. It's pretty cool. And this is not my day job, right? So yeah. I have another winery that I actually like, that's my day job. And so I need to, it all needs to be sustainable. And but yeah, even in the up until now, what we've accomplished is we historically sent 100% of our profits to a nonprofit clinic, an open door, no questions asked, free bilingual healthcare clinic called the SOS Clinic here. It's officially in College Place, Washington, but it's really in the Walla area where all these vineyards are. So that was what we were doing. And then when COVID hit, one thing we did was we launched the Day at Home program. So the Day at Home program was a fundraising venture where we would just, no strings attached, no red tape. We would hand cash $108 a day per worker who wanted to stay home if they worked on a crew where somebody had tested positive, because these are the people who a speed bump is a big deal, right? Any speed bump is a brick wall. And so to be able to, for instance, we found that certain people didn't want to carpool anymore with somebody who had tested positive, or they lived with their brother who was waiting for his test results, or, I mean, you name it, any iteration. The very first bit of money that we handed out was to a single mom of a child with Down syndrome who just could not get sick, right? It was not an option for her. And somebody had tested positive on her crew and she just put the brakes on. So that was the Day at Home program. And then once the vaccine started being available, what we saw was the gossip about the vaccine, if you will, was disproportionately English, right? So like where are the clinics, or are there extra, or are we in a new phase, or you don't need an ID to get vaccinated, or you may or may not have these symptoms afterwards. All of that, while yes, the CDC, I'm sure somewhere had a website, that was like it, right? And so on a local front, we started a texting program to alert the Latino community about all of what I like to call the gossip. So we did that.
Wow. I mean, both of those things are just incredible. I think it's so heartwarming to hear, especially just that story about that mother. Like, I don't know what you would do, how, if you weren't there in Walla Walla helping some people, like, how can they navigate the system? The system is complicated enough, and yet not to be giving the resources to the most vulnerable populations that need it the most. Like, kudos to you for having the foresight to even do that.
Well, that's the thing, is it's not that much foresight. I mean, we're a small town and we're a small industry. Like, you just look around, it's right here, right now, right there. I mean, it's easy to spot where the cracks are that everybody's slipping through. And
also, probably, I mean, I would assume you now have a reputation in Walla Walla for being somebody kind and generous who supports that population. And so they probably know that you're a trusted source, which I think is probably helpful too.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at sort of the Salud program in the Willamette and a lot of the Napa programs that have functioned, a big part of it has been like one nurse who is trusted, right? Who has stuck around for a long, long time. And that's what it takes.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I still think it's incredible, even though it feels like you're downplaying it a little bit. I think it's incredible work. And, somebody needs to step up where voices aren't being heard, or there isn't access to the resources that we all need to remain healthy. It reminds me, I had a conversation with a couple of women last week, and they also were talking about, the expectation on people when they work in places like restaurants. It used to be you got the flu or you had a fever, and because you're living paycheck to paycheck, you're just expected to show up to work. And so how do we change those expectations, where, again, it goes back to, how do we treat human beings like human beings and put their health and their well-being ahead of the profit or what has to get done that day, and make sure that people know that they'll still have a job if they can't come into work because of their health. So,
well, and I would add one layer of complexity to that, which is sort of the machismo effect, which is you've got this cultural machismo of like, I can do it. Don't worry about it. I'll show up. I'll work harder. I'll be there anyway. I'm sick, but it doesn't matter. I'll be there. And certainly sort of the hustlers who are in jobs that can put up with this kind of work. I mean, that's the flip side to that coin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's also really important to note. What other types of access to healthcare do you foster, and how do you partner with companies that will provide that, or organizations that will provide that, and, more so in general, people in need?
Yeah, I mean, those are all layers that we're just going to start tacking on. Like I said, historically, we've donated to this nonprofit clinic. In a small town, a lot of what's needed is just information, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's as easy as that, just spreading information. We're working with our local hospital by Q3 or Q4 of this year to fundraise enough to create what's called a promotor de salud. So it's a promoter of health. So it's a person who goes out, a paid position, full-time, who goes out into the community and just does the easy breezy stuff that makes a world of difference. So things like, does this person need a sandwich? Does this woman need to know about a women's shelter, right? Does this person need to understand that what they have is arthritis or diabetes, or that mammograms are preventative health care that's worth getting, and it's not somebody just fondling your boobs, right? I mean, all this stuff is very like, it's low-hanging fruit, but boy, is it really important. And it's so cheap to solve. But it's just information.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. So you mentioned before that every year you sometimes, or every year now you turn away fruit. How right now do you source the fruit for the wines, and how do you work in collaboration with some of those wineries?
Yeah. So what's so fun about being the Vital Winemaker, or one of the Vital Winemakers, is that it's really like Iron Chef for winemaking. Like everybody just throws a bunch of surprises at you. You're like, okay, here we go. I got it. I could do it. And that's really fun. But it's even more so because we are approached by the most expensive, highly acclaimed vineyards in the state. And so if you say no 3 or 4 years in a row, then they go away, and they
Mhm.
stop offering to donate, and their feelings are hurt, right?
Mhm.
I mean, it was a generous offer. And so in order to accommodate all of those vineyards and also keep my head on straight and do my day job, we do need to sort of rotate everybody. And so we try very hard to rotate, but what it means is every Vital wine is extremely a unicorn for that reason, right? We do not promise consistency other than it will be consistently delicious and high quality, but otherwise, consistency is not what we're doing. We're galvanizing a state together to create change.
Mm, that's beautiful. The wines are very delicious, by the way. Uh, so, for people who don't know, you can join the wine club as I have, and you can get your shipments of the wine. And it's not only are the wines really tasty and fun because you don't know necessarily what they're going to be, but they also are, of course, it's feel good because you're giving back and supporting this community. So I would encourage people to go out and support you. And I'm going to plug you again. So what else do you think consumers need to know about the wines they choose and buy, and how they spend their dollars?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I think we're really going to grow into that being easier. I think at every stage of an industry, you have very obvious goals, and they're very hard to achieve quite yet. It's just not, that's a tough one. I think we've spent the last decade and a half. I mean, that question is kind of like asking a winery in 1970, like, okay, so where are the organic and biodynamic vineyards, and how do I make sure I'm only buying them? Like, great question. I'm sure, there are bits and pieces and places. I'm sure everybody's got that on their brain, but like, can I answer that question? No. so, but I think everybody is tracking towards that. I think, and I'm woefully ignorant right now because we're coming out of this pandemic and I have 2 little kids. And so I'm sure there are all sorts of organizations, increasingly, I'm finding a lot of women winery organizations that are promoting wineries owned by women. And so, that's chugging along, and I'm slightly aware of some of those. But as far as organizations that are touting wineries and vineyards that are culturally sustainable and sort of focused on human rights, I don't know. I bet they're out there. But I don't know who that is. And I think that's telling, right? The fact that I don't know who that would be is telling. So
Well, there's
yeah,
one. There's one. It's called Vino Karma.
yeah, you guys. Yeah. So shameless plug for Vino Karma. Everybody should sign up for the newsletter for Vino Karma and listen.
And join our events.
Join the events. And yeah. I mean, I think that's why it's so important that you're doing, and why I said yes today, right? That you're doing what you're doing, because I honestly can't think of many other organizations. There's a really cool organization called A Balanced Glass that's about sort of health and mental health and well-being within the wine industry. And it's focused kind of on how you don't drink too much and yet still be in the wine industry. That's one aspect of like, how do you navigate those waters when you're constantly being asked to participate in 17,000 events, right? But that's kind of different from what you're talking about. It's important, but it is different than what you're talking about. So props to you.
Thanks. No, I do think that's extremely important, particularly during this pandemic, when you look at the whole of the hospitality industry and the toll it has taken on people and their mental health and well-being through this pandemic. People who have lost their jobs, or people who are trying to figure out, how do I step back into this industry, which is very high touch, and not feel like I'm putting myself at risk. It's going to be interesting to see how, with the world rapidly opening up right now, what changes and how we do continue to support, again, health and well-being, but also, the mental health aspect, which we don't talk about enough. So I think that that's really important. Are there any trends or changes you're seeing in the trade or in the industry that you're super excited about, that you think are changing the face of the industry right now?
On the female winemaking front, I think part of, and I kind of had this debate with Eric Asimov a while ago, and I'm not sure I won the debate, but the debate was as follows: like, if there is sort of one or 20 or 30 female winemakers in the country, like, no matter what they do, I think the 18 to 30-year-old women who are contemplating entering the industry, it almost doesn't matter, because it still seems so unattainable, right? Like, how many women winemaker are there? Like 8, right? It's not going to be me, so I give up. And so I think eventually, it's kind of like looking at what Bono does, right? Like, okay, so Bono does what Bono does. It doesn't affect me, because that will never be my world, right? So there's some of that. And then I think just that natural progression of now trickling in, there are enough female winemakers that that those movements can take shape. You can have symposiums, you can have organizations, you can have conferences, you can have websites, you can have groupings of some sort, you can have movements, right? And then from that, there's effectiveness in numbers. So that's happening. And I think very much that's going to be the same exact thing that you see coming out of the Latino community, that within Napa and Willamette and the Finger Lakes district and Walla Walla and all these different places, you simply will see enough of those Latinos that grew up in cellars, Latinos that grew up in vineyards, enough Latinos that sort of grew up between two cultures that have finally aged into a place where they have access to investors, or they are confident because they're not 17 anymore and now they're 25, or now they're 30. And the institutional knowledge is there. It's just sort of the confidence and the connections and the all of that. And then you're just going to see a whiplash of overdue change.
I've been trying to find Latinx people to interview. I'm like, where are they? Where's their group? Like, how can I get in front of them and put them in front of our audience to support them? I'm starting to find a couple out of Napa, but or like family-owned, family-run vineyards. But I think there's a gap still of, how do we highlight people's stories where they're working in the fields and then maybe they've moved to front of house at a tasting room, or they've been able to, figure out how to navigate this industry. So yeah, I'm excited to watch that progression and for that day. Can you share a little bit about Brooke and Bull, and any information you want to share with folks about that, or what's next for Vital and Brooke and Bull as well?
Yeah. So Brooke and Bull is my day job. That's my normal winery. So we're a 3,000 case a year winery out of the Walla Valley, and focused on high-end varietals that are not sort of trounced with oak. So how do you showcase just a really amazing version of one varietal while not covering it up with oak? I think so many of these wines out there that are beautifully done and very high end are sometimes have a little more oak on them than they need to. And so that's what we do at Brooke and Bull. We do some blends that really are not defined by tradition. I don't really enjoy being told what to do, so I do what I feel like doing, and that kind of explains what we're doing at Brooke and Bull, and it's a lot of fun.
And anything else on the horizon for either Brooke and Bull or Vital Wines that people need to be aware of so that they can watch out for it?
Gosh, good question. I mean, both brands are growing so quickly that really, in a lot of respects, I would suggest getting on the newsletter or getting in the wine club, because we tend to sell out of stuff very, very quickly, which has been awesome. And one thing that we saw during the pandemic was that not only were people drinking, but they were drinking really well, at like nice wines. And I sort of experienced that myself of like, I love chocolate. It was not the time for Hershey's Kisses. It was the time for like good chocolate, because everything else was bad, you know? And so I think we saw that on the wine front, and people told their friends who told their friends about this little gem box winery that they knew of, and this social project that they knew of for Vital. And so, yeah, both Brooke and Bull and Vital have become much more in demand than ever before. And we were doing fine before. So that would be my suggestion. Shameless plug there is get on the newsletter and maybe even join the wine club.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate the shameless plugs, because this is what we're here for, to support winemakers and change makers and tastemakers who are doing incredible things, and who are making incredible wines. I do think it's funny though, for me, like going through the pandemic, there were phases of the pandemic. The first phase was really like, what wine can I pair with Ben and Jerry's? And then the next phase was like, okay, this is getting out of control. Now I need to get back to my fitness and drinking better wines and laying off the Ben and Jerry's, but moving more to the high-end chocolates and the high-end experiences as well at home. When we were supporting our local restaurants, really thinking through, not only supporting them, but also supporting winemakers to attach to those restaurants, and trying some new things that we wouldn't necessarily have in our house because we're stuck here. But it's been an interesting time. And I hope there are some things that, I hope consumers do continue to support people like you and other smaller boutique wineries, and learn more and take that journey of, like, where is Walla and what's going on in Walla, and wow, there's some cool stuff coming out of Walla. So I appreciate that. Is there anything that I haven't asked you or we haven't talked about that I should have asked you?
No, I wish I could give you answers for 20 years from now, right? Like, just hand you a bunch of wineries that are socially sustainable, and I wish, but no, I think we covered what we could cover in 2021.
Yeah. And who knows what the rest of the year is going to bring. So, especially as, I'm here in California and we're opening up rapidly, and restaurants are moving to being able to have more folks inside. And so it's going to be interesting to see if that change continues and what changes are being made in the hospitality industry as a whole, and how we shift again. So I appreciate the conversation. So once again, please go out and support Ashley at both of her wineries, Brooke and Bull and Vital Wines. We will have the links below so that you can go out and support her. And I cannot thank you enough for your time. I know you're extremely busy going out there and creating change, and really, with your wines, doing incredible things. So as we say here at Vino Karma, please continue to go out there and create change, one sip at a time. Thank you.